Hi, Lou here, and I'm going to try to answer the question of how much detail do you need to include when building a world for a game? The answer is as little as you can get away with, because the important thing is not the world, it's the game. People come to play the game, not to admire your world. Now, you may imagine that you're the new Tolkien or something like that, but the chances of that happening are somewhere between diddly and squat. That's the realistic point of view. Consider Tolkien was making a world first and stories second. I'm going to quote J.R.R. Tolkien. "Nobody believes me when I say that my long book is an attempt to create a world in which a form of language agreeable to my personal aesthetic might seem real, but it is true." His main interest was the world. On the other hand, I have a quote from M. John Harrison, who's written over 20 novels, science fiction, fantasy, and such. "Every moment of a science fiction story must represent the triumph of writing over world building." Unquote. In other words, showing people your world is not the purpose, it's writing a story. Now, this doesn't sit well with some people because they want to make a world. They're really perhaps more interested in making a world than in running a game. If that's so, then you can decide to put more detail into your world, but don't be disappointed if your players aren't really interested. Nowadays, especially because of video games, people want to play a game, they don't want to look at a world. And I recall in particular reading a quote, which I don't have specifically, from somebody involved in one of the big MMOs, saying that even though they left material around that players could find and read, they discovered that most players didn't bother to read it. Now, that material might have helped the players do better in that world, do better in that game, but they didn't bother. That seems to be the general attitude of people playing games, that they don't care about the world, they want to play the game. So once again, if you spend a lot of time and effort making a world and the players aren't interested, you're going to be really disappointed. You may even feel that you've wasted your time, and perhaps you have wasted your time. Now, the extreme of this, just enough to get by, is Jeffro Johnson, who wrote the Appendix N book about the origins of D&D. He says you only need to know about 6 things about your world to get going. But he is very much a fan of GMing by the seat of your pants and not having a lot of details prepared ahead of time, because he thinks that leads to more interesting adventures. If you're a person who wants to be prepared, then you're probably going to know a lot more about your world than Jeffro advocates. So, in a way, the answer is it depends. But I prefer my answer only enough to get away with. Now, I will interject, if you like to make maps, I like to make maps, go ahead and make maps. But don't put too much detail in. Don't get locked into things. Thanks for listening.